So, Kian, I wonder if we sort of move into one of those big T trauma occurrences that happens to us all at some point. Bereavement happens to us all, but it's a really tricky subject for obviously the students themselves, the peers, but then obviously for our, for our maybe our audience here, the teachers. How might we support or better understand the response that might be required for students when they are affected by bereavement?
And bereavement has such a massive impact on all involved, and again, trying to consider my first steps when approaching a situation where there's been a bereavement goes back to some similar principles. Actually, is that it's not a problem-solving situation.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a space to sit, listen, understand, have patience, consider what might be going on for a student or for the school system as a whole, depending on what the bereavement might be. So I can't emphasize that enough, that the first instance actually requires patience and stillness.
One thing that strikes me as well, though, with as traumatic event as bereavement is that young person's world would have been destroyed, turned upside down. And I'm back to an old idea that we've already discussed, in that the world has been turned upside down. How do we manage to bring something back which is familiar and safe for them? And it strikes me that school, the teacher, has the opportunity, is the person, is the place, to bring that level of consistency, to bring that familiarity back, so that the world can, maybe everything else has been shook upside down outside, but back in this place it should hopefully feel safe.
Yeah. You've talked about the routine of school, the consistency, the general everyday ritual of getting up and going to school. You know, all of these things are what's needed for the young person to get back to life as normal, or to get back to a life that they can engage with again. So having a predictable environment is really, really helpful for a young person in traveling that journey from a bereavement.
The other thing that we've talked about, I guess, is different responses to trauma, to difficult situations. And maybe something just to be mindful too is that whilst being there, being patient, acknowledging, validating, that understanding if the young person feels ready to, what they want the response to be. So absolutely acknowledging it, but then understanding from them about how should we talk to your friends in the class? Because those friends in class will be nervous as well, and unsure maybe of how to respond. Alongside that, maybe it's just watching for big changes in the behaviour. So an absolute behaviour change where they've completely withdrawn, or maybe it's the other way where the behaviours are more extreme.
Their response is natural for them. It's a coping mechanism. Whatever they're doing, it's what they're doing to get them through a given day, to get them through a given week. And we'd say, as a rule of thumb, generally you're looking at least 6 months of a young person after a significant bereavement where they're still really going through that, and to acknowledge and to note that professional support or any kind of expert input isn't necessarily required in that first 6 months. Absolutely listen to the young person, whatever way they want to approach it, and support their needs in that, whatever they do feel ready for. But that first 6 months, it's a real grieving period, and to understand that whatever they're exhibiting at that point is a natural response to a big T trauma.
And maybe the other thing is it's recognizing that hearing and absorbing this news from somebody else is impactful as well. So there's something around the teacher or the person that's involved in acknowledging that they need to mind themselves too, because taking that trauma on a secondary basis does impact. So I think what we've covered there is an acknowledgement of of everyday life and big T trauma that can affect us, specifically looking at bereavement and the loss of somebody. What we might consider to be a response that can offer safety, familiarity, and consistency for a young person who's been affected by it. Strategies to support that young person, but maybe also the wider peer group. But also, crucially, I'd suggest, is that the teacher themselves is self-aware, recognizing that holding this type of information, supporting a student is tough.